Top 8 Differences Between Fire and Blood Book and House of the Dragon Episode 7. Before we begin, beware of dragon-sized spoilers that are coming up ahead. Therefore, stay here at your own risk or fly away. The 7th episode of House of the Dragon had the most fangs than any other episode before it. Aemond Targaryen managed to grab Vhagar, the biggest nuke in the Seven Kingdoms, and lost an eye because of that. Alicent showed an entirely new and violent side. Rhaenyra and Damon planned her husband's murder, and this niece-uncle duo drank blood from a cup to finally tie the knot, in a manner of speaking that is. While all these plot points are taken directly from the source material, there exist major differences between the two. This is our 7th video of the top differences between Fire and Blood and House of the Dragon, and we will explore the 8 major variations of the HBO show's Episode 7, Let's Dracarys. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Number 1. The royal court does not attend Lena's funeral in the books. Laena Valerion's death was a tragic loss and the first of many tragedies that House Valerion would suffer. The year would give way to several incidents that would fuel the long-simmering jealousies and tensions that had plagued Westeros and House Targaryen itself. Anyway, in our last video about the differences between the book and the 6th episode of House of the Dragon, we explained how Laena never committed suicide by dragonfire. In Driftmark, after giving birth to a son after a labor of almost 24 hours, Laena was left weak and pale. The little child was born twisted and malformed, and did not survive more than an hour. The labor had weakened her beyond what she could bear, and she probably knew that her end was near. She made a last attempt to ride her dragon Vhagar one more time before passing away. Laena would push away the septas praying for her health, and tried to reach Vhagar, but she collapsed on the stairs and passed away. Prince Damon carried his dead wife back to her bed and mourned the loss. However, the show tells us a different story. Firstly, the HBO show tells us that Laena died in Pentos, and her body was then brought to Driftmark. The second major difference in the show is Laena Valerion's funeral. The king and his court did not journey to Driftmark for Laena Valerion's funeral. Instead, her funeral was a less extravagant affair, with only the Valerians and Rhaenyra's family attending it. And to us, it seems logical, because Viserys did not care much when Daemon's first wife, Lady Rhea, died. So it would not make sense for him to put so much importance on Laena's death. Well, yes, she was clearly more closely related to Viserys than Rhea Royce. I mean, Laena was not only supposed to be his second wife, but she was also her brother's wife and his niece. But that doesn't mean that the king did not visit Driftmark for a funeral. He did so to attend the funeral of the Sea Snake's son and Rhaenyra's first husband, Laenor Velaryon, who had been killed by someone very close to him, but we will come to that as well. I suppose Laenor Velaryon's fate is probably the starkest difference between the show and the book. Let's explore it already, shall we? Number 2. Sir Laenor Velaryon's fate. The Lord of the Tides and his wife Rhaenys Targaryen were still mourning the departure of their lovely daughter Laena Velaryon when they got the news that the stranger had taken their son Laenor Velaryon. Laenor was visiting a fair in Spicetown sometime after his sister's untimely death when his lover, Sir Qarl Corey, stabbed Sir Laenor and killed him. The witnesses noted that they saw the two men quarreling loudly before they drew their blades. After killing Laenor, Qarl Corey fled on a ship that had been awaiting him offshore, never to be seen again. Qarl's fate became unknown. However, in the show, Rhaenyra expresses to Damon how she wanted to marry him. However, Damon interjected that they could not marry each other till the time Laenor was alive. It seems that Rhaenyra asks her uncle to kill her husband, a husband who had recently opened his heart out to her and promised to live by her side and prove to be a good husband. Later, Damon offers Qarl a huge amount of gold in return for giving Laenor a quick death in front of witnesses. It's not before long that Damon is seen killing a Valerian guard, and Qarl does as he was bid by Damon. Corlys and his wife are left broken to find the charred remains of their only son. However, Damon says about Laenor, "Then do him this kindness, set him free." Furthermore, Rhaenyra says things like the sea is a source of escape while fire serves as a prison. She goes on to say that people would somehow blame her for Sir Laenor's death, and her enemies would dread the things she could do to get what is hers. And yet, she and Damon would know the truth about Laenor's demise. In the end, we see Carl, Quarry, and Sir Laenor escaping Driftmark on a ship, away from the insidious infighting and politics of Westeros. So, we personally believe that Rhaenyra never wanted her husband to die, but yes, he was of no use to her. Furthermore, she wanted Daemon as her husband because with him by his side, her claim to the Iron Throne would get significantly strengthened, and even Laenor would have wanted a life out of Westeros and in a place where he could freely live as who he was, a place where he would not have to hide his sexuality. Naturally, Daemon made an offer to Carl and Laenor, and the two of them were happy enough to oblige. But if our theory is correct, who was the man whose body was burned and disguised as Sir Laenor's? Well, Daemon kills a guard, right? It could have been him. I mean, they had to get a man who looked like a Valerian. We believe Laenor and Carl made the wisest decision yet in the show. Sir Criston Cole had once offered Rhaenyra a similar proposition, one which she refused. The refusal turned Sir Criston Cole against his sworn protector, and he ended up becoming one of her greatest problems. Honestly, we're happy for Laenor, and we commend him for his decision to choose love over power. Number 3. Aemond is not so heroic in the book, while mounting Vhagar for the first time. Both the show and the book tell that Aemond Targaryen was dragonless for quite a while, or at least until he was 10. But then, after Laena's funeral in Driftmark, Aemond goes on to find Laena's dragon Vhagar, and bravely mounts it. The show portrays Aemond as a rather meek child until now, but once he gets the largest battle weapon in the entire world, his demeanor changes, and he becomes bolder. When we compare it with the book, Aemond mounts Vhagar in an entirely different fashion, so when the king visited Driftmark with his family and court to attend Laenor Valerion's funeral, Aemond was just a boy of 10, and yet he did not lack boldness and valor. Oh yes, Laenor's funeral and not Laena's, because we're talking about the book. Anyway, he did not want some stupid dragon egg that hadn't hatched or a puny hatchling that would take years to grow. And why would he want all that when Vhagar, the largest and most ferocious dragon alive, was present right there at high tide? But even for a Targaryen, approaching a fully grown dragon was dangerous, particularly when this dragon was old and ill-tempered, and had recently lost her rider. We say her because Vhagar was a she-dragon. Viserys would never allow Aemond in the vicinity of Vhagar, let alone riding the beast. And no one would from Driftmark would help him because Vhagar was supposed to go to one of Laena's daughters, well, because of birthright and stuff. So, he did what any mad fool with boldness would do. Aemond slid from his bed just before the sun came up, while everyone else was asleep. He inched closer to the yard where the other dragons and Vhagar were rested, and fed. However, his plan of mounting Vhagar in secrecy was foiled when Joffrey Valerion, his half-nephew and Rhaenyra's son, shouted from behind, "You stay away from her." Joffrey was an early bird and would often sneak from his bed to visit his dragon, Tyraxes. Aemond was scared that his younger cousin would alarm others, and he would be grounded or punished or whatever it was that was done to princes when they did crazy stuff. He pushed Joffrey into a giant pile of dragon shit, and the 3-year-old began crying out. Aemond then raced to Vhagar and climbed up onto the dragon's back. We believe he was more afraid of being caught than afraid of being turned into a human barbecue. We're entirely sure that this was more madness than boldness, and a wild attempt at evading his father's fury. Nevertheless, the dragon who once helped Aegon the Conqueror was now the personal weapon of a young, angry blonde boy. However, that is not what happened in the show, which depicts Aemond's adventures in the light of bravery and valor. But hey, how did Aemond end up losing his eye? Well, that brings us to our next entry in this list.
Dead. Vhagar has a new rider now.
She was mine to claim.
Then you should have claimed her. Maybe your cousins can...
Number 4. Aemond fights only Rhaenyra's sons Jacaerys and Lucerys, and not Daemon's daughters Bayla and Rayna. In the show, after Aemond returns from his midnight flight, Rhaenyra's sons Jacaerys and Lucerys and Daemon's daughters Bayla and Rayna spurn him for stealing Laena's dragon. However, Aemond is filled with pride and tells the girls, "Maybe your cousins could find you a pig to ride. It would suit you." He had said so because in the previous episode, his nephews and his brother Aegon had pulled a similar prank on him. Nevertheless, the girls became furious at the slander and attacked Aemond. He knocked them down, but the two boys came forward to defend their cousins, who were also supposed to be their wives. Yup, that's another thing we'll talk about in this video. But the fight soon turned violent, and although Aemond defended himself to the best of his ability, there were 4 of them and 1 of him. Vhagar's new rider had Prince Lucerys in one of his hands and a stone in the other. When he addressed Jacaerys as Lord Strong, effectively calling him a bastard, Jace loses his shit and pulled a knife on Aemond, who defended himself and would have killed Jace had it not been for Luke, who slashed Aemond's face, leaving him blind in one eye. However, there are quite a few differences between these scenes and the book. The source material does not bring in the little girls into the picture. As we mentioned earlier, it was Joffrey who alerted his elder brothers as opposed to the Valerian girls. Naturally, only Rhaenyra's boys were waiting for Aemond. Instead of a steel dagger, the boys had armed themselves with wooden swords, with which they trained. Yes, there was a dagger involved, but it did not belong to Jacaerys. So what happened was, Jace and Luke had managed to drive Aemond to his knees, despite the fact that Aemond had broken Luke's nose. The boys were moving back because they knew what they had done, but Aemond mocked them and called them the Strongs, an insult that Jace could not take. He attacked Aemond, but the latter started throwing punches at Jace, which was when Luke came to his brother's rescue, drew his dagger, and slashed Aemond's face, taking out his right eye. In the show, the fight is interrupted by the Kingsguard, but the books had given this role to the stable boys who had arrived at the scene after hearing the commotion and Vhagar's roars.
Both my seat and high tide will be yours one day, Lucerys. Your brother will be king, of course.
Number 5. Corlys does not show his wish to name Luke his heir to Driftmark, and Lena and Bayla are not in the picture at all. Both my seat and high tide will be yours one day, Lucerys. That's what Corlys Velaryon tells the young prince at Lena's funeral. Later, while talking to his wife Rhaenys, he tells her that history remembers names and not blood. Then Rhaenys says, "I want Driftmark to pass through Lena's line, to Bayla." He claims that he cannot disinherit his son who is still alive. Furthermore, he is supposed to be king consort, and the throne would pass to Jacaerys after Rhaenyra. Therefore, both Laenor and Jacaerys cannot become the heir to Driftmark. Naturally, the next in line for the position is Lucerys Velaryon, Jacaerys' younger brother, but that's not quite what happened in the book. In the year 126 AC, Corlys Velaryon was stricken by a terrible fever, and by now, both his true-born children were dead. He was surrounded by several maesters who were doing everything they could, but could not assure if the sea snake would survive. Naturally, the question of his succession arose. With Laenor and Lena gone, no one knew who would be the new Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark. By the inheritance laws of Westeros, when such situations occur, the titles and properties of Corlys should have been passed on to his eldest grandson from his eldest son, and this child would be Jacaerys. However, he was supposed to ascend the Iron Throne one day, and therefore his mother Rhaenyra requested King Viserys to name Lucerys as Corlys' heir and the future Lord of the Tides and Master of Driftmark. Clearly, Damon and Lena's daughters were nowhere in the picture, but this was also because both Bayla and her twin sister Rayna had been betrothed to the two Valerian Princelings.
Alicent, stay with the king!
Number 6. Alicent and Rhaenyra's fight does not happen so dramatically. After the children were brought before the king, the maester says that Prince Aemond's flesh would heal, but he would lose the eye. Alicent lost her calm and slapped her elder son Aegon for not looking after his brother. However, King Viserys could not understand what to do when his own children and grandchildren fought each other. The scene was reminiscent of the dilemma that King Robert faced when Arya's wolf had bitten Joffrey Baratheon. Anyway, Alicent was furious that her son had lost an eye and wanted justice, but Rhaenyra tells him about the vile insults levied against her children and begs the king to sharply question Aemond. Aemond says that he heard about Jace and Luke's bastard birth from Aegon, who told his father that everyone knew about it. Viserys was at a loss of words, but in the end he said, "Anyone whose tongue dares to question the birth of Princess Rhaenyra's children shall have it removed." He asks his family to apologize to each other and consider the proceedings finished. Up until now, the show and the source material resemble each other. However, in the book, when Queen Alicent asks for one of Lucerys' eyes to be removed, the king shuns her and she shuts up, but in the show, she does not do so. When Sir Criston Cole refuses to act upon her command, she draws Viserys' Valyrian steel blade and charges toward Lucerys, only to be stopped by Rhaenyra. Rhaenyra almost manipulates Alicent to reveal her true nature. Until now, Alicent had portrayed herself as a righteous woman who lived as a dutiful wife, queen, and mother. However, it was now that the true power of her motivations had come come to the fore. She held a knife at Rhaenyra while revealing her darkest secrets and ended up slashing Rhaenyra's wrist. However, this is in stark contrast with what happened in the book. There was no physical fight between the princess and the queen. In fact, in 127 AC, the king had started to recover from his ailments and a huge feast was thrown. It was attended by both sides, and to display amity, the princess and the queen wore each other's colors. Alicent's children greeted Rhaenyra and ate together, but after the events of the 7th episode, we're not sure if that will happen in the days to come. Number 7. Damon and Rhaenyra's marriage takes place at least 6 months after Lena's death, not immediately after. In the show, Princess Rhaenyra and Damon get married almost immediately after Laenor's presumed death. However, Martin in his book writes, and we quote, "Neither Damon's wife nor Rhaenyra's husband had been dead even half a year. To wed again so soon was an insult to their memories." The details of their marriage are not mentioned in the books, and the whole blood-drinking ceremony seems to be HBO's creation. However, it was revealed that neither the king nor the realm was happy about the marriage. It should be interesting to see how the infighting will take shape, as Rhaenyra now has her strongest ally and supporter by her side, in the form of her uncle husband, Daemon Targaryen. Number 8. Bayla and Rayna have not been betrothed to Jace and Luke yet. Although Rhaenyra and Alicent had been friends, they grew up to become bitter enemies. We guess you could either die friends or live long enough to see yourself become enemies. Or was this quote about heroes and villains? Moving on, their friendship was something of a mystery in House of the Dragon. I mean, when they lay together under their wirewood tree, it was difficult to figure out if they were just friends or something more. Nevertheless, Princess Rhaenyra grew close to her good sister, Laena Velaryon. The two women would often fly on their dragons together. The book did not send Damon and Laena to another continent, and Damon and his wife lived in Driftmark. Damon and his wife would often visit Rhaenyra in Dragonstone, and the two families bonded well. Naturally, they wanted to strengthen this bond by way of marriage. Rhaenyra had 2 sons by now, the 4-year-old Jacaerys and the 3-year-old Lucerys, while Laena had twin daughters named Bayla and Rayna. With the blessings of King Viserys, Rhaenyra betrothed her 2 eldest sons with Daemon's daughters in the year 118 AC. However, the show has only hinted at this match. In the funeral scene, Rhaenyra asks Jace to go and speak to Laena's daughters because they are his kin. Jacaerys believes that he has an equal claim to kind words. He was talking about Breakbones, who Jacaerys believed was his real father, and he was killed in episode 6. Nevertheless, when Jacaerys goes up to Rayna and Bayla, the latter holds his hand and the two share a moment of innocent intimacy. Clearly, the stage is being set for Jacaerys and Lucerys to be betrothed to Bayla and Rayna. With the new trailer for episode 8, we can tell that there will be more differences between the show and the book, but more on that later. Let's wait for another week and we'll have another informative video for you. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.